Travis was born on October 21, 1995, at what is now known as the Missouri Chimpanzee Sanctuary in Festus, Missouri. His parents, Susie and Coco, had both been wild caught in Africa and brought to the United States, where they were kept for breeding. 3 days after his birth, Travis was taken from his mother and sold to Jerome and Sandra Harold for $50,000. Susie would later be killed after escaping the sanctuary that bred her, a quiet and largely unremarked footnote to a story that would later make headlines around the world. The Harolds named their chimp after Travis Tritt, their favorite country singer, and brought him home to Stamford, Connecticut, where he was raised not as an animal but as a son. He rode in the family truck, posed for photographs, and ran errands alongside Sandra and Jerome as they went about their towing business. He was a fixture of the neighborhood, well-known and well-liked, even by local police officers, who regarded him as a quirky, harmless local celebrity rather than a 200-pound wild primate. Neighbor Tony McCurry used to wrestle with Travis on a regular basis, and later said the animal was always careful when playing, knowing instinctively when to stop. By McCurry's account, Travis listened to instructions better than his own nephews did. The chimp could dress himself, water the plants, and feed hay to the Harold's horses. He ate dinner at the table with the rest of the family and drank wine from a glass. He knew how to use keys to let himself in and out of the house and would log on to the family computer to look through photographs. He watched baseball on television, operating the remote control himself, brushed his own teeth, and on at least 1 or 2 occasions, took the wheel of a car. He even learned the schedule of the local ice cream truck so that he would know exactly when to expect one of his favorite treats. Travis's talents extended well beyond the Harold household. He appeared in television commercials for Pepsi and Old Navy, made a guest appearance on the Maury Povich Show, and was cast in a television pilot that never made it to air. The actress Morgan Fairchild, who once worked alongside him, would later call him a gentle professional performer. To the wider public, Travis was less a chimpanzee than a minor celebrity, a chimp who lived, ate, and behaved like a person, and who seemed, by every visible measure, to have entirely transcended his wild nature. This impression was not entirely an illusion. Chimpanzees are remarkably intelligent animals, capable of learning, memory, and social bonding far beyond what most domestic pets display. Travis had been raised from infancy in a human household, surrounded constantly by human faces, human routines, and human affection, and he had absorbed an extraordinary amount of that world. To Sandra and Jerome Harold, who had never owned a chimpanzee before, they were not a curiosity or a novelty act. They were, in every sense that mattered to them, a son, a presence who filled the house, anchored their daily lives, and accompanied them through more than a decade of work, holidays, and quiet evenings at home. It was precisely this closeness, built up year after year, that made what was coming so difficult for anyone to anticipate. The first sign that this carefully maintained illusion had limits came in October 2003. Travis was riding in the Harold's car when a passing pedestrian threw an object that struck him. Enraged, the chimp let himself out of the vehicle and gave chase, sending the offending stranger fleeing for safety. A wise decision, given that the animal pursuing him weighed roughly 200 pounds and was furious. Loose on a public street, Travis spent close to 2 hours roaming the area before he was finally brought under control. Police were called, and what followed was part chase and part farce. Officers attempted to lure Travis back into the car using cookies, ice cream, and macadamia nuts, only for the chimp to immediately let himself back out again the moment he had finished his smack. He chased patrol officers playfully around their vehicles and brought traffic on the road to a standstill for several hours. Only once he had tired himself out could he be subdued with a tranquilizer dart. Nobody was hurt that day, but an animal control officer who responded to the scene warned the Harolds plainly that keeping an adult chimpanzee in a private home was not safe. The warning went unheeded. In its wake, however, the state of Connecticut tightened its regulations, requiring anyone who wished to keep an exotic animal to first obtain a permit. Because the Harold had owned Travis for so long already, the new rule was never enforced against them. rather than reducing Travis's contact with the public, the family responded to the incident by withdrawing him from it almost entirely. He stopped appearing in public outings and instead spent his days indoors, watching television, snacking, and browsing the family computer, with little of the exercise a chimpanzee in the wild would naturally get. By the time he was 14 years old, Travis weighed around 240 pounds, a weight considered morbidly obese for a chimpanzee of his size and age. There were other, murkier warning signs. A woman who lived near the Heralds alleged that Travis had once bitten her and tried to pull her into a car sometime around 1996. She claimed to have reported the incident to police at the time, though no official record of it has ever been found. Whatever the truth of that account, by the late 2000s, those who knew the family best had begun to grow uneasy. Sandra Harold's life, meanwhile, had been marked by a string of personal tragedies. Her only daughter, Suzanne, was killed in a car accident in 2000. Several years later, her husband Jerome died of cancer, leaving Sandra to run the family towing business largely on her own. She leaned heavily on Charla, a longtime friend who had fallen on hard times of her own, having spent more than a year in a homeless shelter with her young daughter. After Jerome's death, Charla offered Sandra a rent-free apartment and steady work helping to manage the business and, increasingly, helping to look after Travis. Charla had known Travis since he was a baby, feeding him oatmeal in his enclosure and helping keep him entertained, but she had also come to recognize the danger he posed. She would later say she had repeatedly warned Sandra that the chimp needed more room to move and exercise, telling her plainly, "He's going to hurt somebody." By 2009, Travis was 14 years old, a fully mature adult male chimpanzee in the prime of his physical strength, yet still housed and treated as though he were the affectionate juvenile the Herald had brought home over a decade earlier. He had grown obese and increasingly sedentary, but he had not grown any less powerful. An adult male chimpanzee, pound for pound, is several times stronger than an adult human being, with a bite force and a capacity for sudden violence that no amount of domestic routine can fully suppress. Those closest to Travis had watched him grow from an infant into a full-grown wild animal, even as they continued, day after day, to treat him like a member of the family. The weekend before the attack, Sandra and Charla took a rare trip together to the Mohegan Sun Casino, stopping first at a salon where Sandra joked that a new look might help them catch the eye of an eligible bachelor. Charla left with a different hairstyle than the one Travis had known for years. On the morning of February 16, 2009, Sandra returned home to find Travis unusually agitated. While she was cleaning his room, he took her car keys from the kitchen counter, let himself out of the house, and wandered into the yard. For the rest of the day, he showed none of his usual interest in his toys, his television programs, or his food. Concerned, Sandra mixed a Xanax tablet into his afternoon tea, hoping it would calm him down. She then called Charla and asked her to come over and help coax Travis back inside. Charla arrived sometime around 3:40 in the afternoon and picked up one of Travis's favorite toys, a Tickle Me Elmo doll, before stepping outside to approach him. The moment Travis caught sight of her, he flew into a sudden and violent rage, lunging at her with overwhelming force. Though he appeared to recognize the doll in her hands, Charla's unfamiliar hairstyle may have left him unable to recognize her face. Whatever the trigger, the attack was immediate and merciless. Travis tore at her face and hands with his teeth and his immense physical strength, and Charla, against an animal many times stronger than any human being, was entirely defenseless. Sandra rushed to save her friend. She struck Travis repeatedly with a shovel, then took up a butcher knife and stabbed him in the back, an act she would later describe as being as painful as plunging the knife into her own body. Travis had been a member of her family for nearly 14 years. Even so, her intervention did nothing to stop him. With the attack still underway, Sandra ran for her phone and dialed 911. Her call to the dispatcher, in which Travis's enraged screams can be heard echoing in the background, would later become infamous, broadcast and replayed across the country in the days that followed.
Stamford 911, where's your emergency?
Oh, this is Sandy. 231 Rock Crimmon Road.
What's the
Send
problem?
the police. Send the police.
What's the problem there?
The chimp killed my friend.
What's the problem with your friend?
Oh, please.
What's the problem with your friend? I need to know.
Let the police up with a gun, with a gun. Hurry
Who
up.
has a gun?
Please, hurry up. He's killing my girlfriend.
What is the problem?
He's killing my friend.
Who's killing your friend?
Chimp, my chimpanzee.
Oh, your chimpanzee is killing your
Yes.
friend.
He ripped her apart. Hurry up.
With a gun.
Hurry up, please.
There's someone on the way.
With guns, please. You shoot him.
What is the monkey doing? Tell me what the monkey's...
He ripped her face off.
He ripped her face off?
He's trying to attack me. Please,
Okay,
hurry.
I need you to calm down a little bit. They're on the way. Can you put yourself away? I don't want the monkey attacking you.
Please, hurry up. Listen to me.
They're on the way, ma'am.
Guns. They gotta shoot him, please. Please, hurry.
Are you there with your friend? I need you to help your friend. Can you go help your
I
friend?
can't. He tried to attack me now.
Is he still there with your friend?
Yes.
Okay, so then back off. Then don't get any closer, okay? They're already on the way.
Please.
If the monkey moves away from your friend, let me know, okay? So we can try to help your friend.
No, I can't. She's dead. She's dead.
Why are you saying that she's dead?
She's dead. He ripped her apart.
He ripped what apart? Her face?
Everything. Oh,
He ripped her apart?
listen, I think I'm gonna faint. I think I'm gonna pass out.
No, just breathe, okay? I'm gonna stay with you on the phone until they get there.
Listen to me. Please hurry. Please hurry. Oh my God. They gotta have their guns out. They gotta have their guns out. Listen to me. Oh my God.
Paramedics arrived at the scene first, but were ordered to wait outside for police backup before approaching. Standard procedure when a dangerous animal remained active at a scene. When they finally reached Charla, her injuries were so severe that for a moment they believed she was already dead. Travis broke off his attack only as the first patrol car pulled into the driveway. Calm now and drenched in blood, he wandered toward the vehicle and tried the handle of the passenger door. When it would not open, he smashed one of the wing mirrors, then circled around to the driver's side, where the door was unlocked. Inside the car was Officer Frank Chiafari. The call that sent him to the scene had initially been logged as a monkey attacking someone, a description so unlikely that for a moment it had almost sounded comic. That impression vanished the instant dispatch upgraded the call to Code 3. As he sped toward Rock Rimmon Road, Chiafari realized with a jolt exactly which animal he was about to confront. The Herald's towing business had worked alongside the police for years, and Travis had ridden along on calls before. This was no stranger. As Travis pulled open the driver's side door, Chiafari fumbled to free his sidearm, his body wedged awkwardly against the patrol car's center console. Travis stared into the vehicle, bearing blood-streaked teeth, close enough that the officer could see the animal's chest heaving. In one motion, Chiafari finally drew his weapon and fired 4 rounds at point-blank range. Travis staggered backward, screeched, and bolted away from the car, back toward the house. He did not die immediately. Such was the raw physical strength of an adult male chimpanzee that he made it all the way back inside, where he collapsed and died beside the cage that had been his enclosure for most of his life. Officer Chiafari stepped out of his cruiser into a yard scattered with debris from the struggle and walked, slowly, toward the woman lying motionless near the driveway.
Charla Nash's injuries were almost beyond description. She had lost her eyelids, her nose, her lips, and the bone structure of her midface. Travis had torn away 9 of her 10 fingers and left her permanently blind in both eyes, along with significant injuries to her brain tissue. The hospital staff who first treated her were offered counseling afterward, so extraordinary was the nature of her wounds. Over the following 72 hours, 4 separate surgical teams worked through more than 7 hours of operations, removing fragments of Travis's hair and broken teeth that had become lodged in her bones, and reattaching her shattered jaw. On April 7th, doctors confirmed what many had already feared: Charla would be blind for the rest of her life. In November of 2009, she appeared on The Oprah Winfrey Show to share her story, telling viewers that she had warned Sandra about the danger Travis posed long before the attack ever happened. She spoke candidly about exotic animals, arguing that creatures like Travis simply did not belong in residential homes, regardless of how gentle they seemed. In May of 2011, she underwent an experimental full-face and double-hand transplant performed by a surgical team at Brigham and Women's Hospital. The procedure was initially successful, but when Charla developed a serious infection days later, doctors were forced to remove both transplanted hands to save her life. She has continued to live with some degree of independence ever since, relying on family and caregivers, though she will never fully recover from what was done to her that February afternoon. Officer Frank Chiafari carried his own, quieter wounds away from the scene. In the weeks that followed, he found he could no longer wear a red shirt without being reminded of the blood in that driveway, and for a long time he could not bring himself to drive down the road where the shooting had taken place. He sought therapy for what he came to recognize as post-traumatic stress, struggling at first to even believe such a condition was real. He later declined to take part in a televised reenactment of the attack, and to this day avoids any program about animal attacks. Despite everything, he has never blamed the animal he was forced to kill. "I consider him a victim," he has said simply. Sandra Harold did not long outlive her chimp. Charla's family filed a $50 million lawsuit against her, and a Connecticut judge ultimately froze $10 million of her assets. Charla would eventually receive a settlement of around $4 million from Sandra's estate, a fraction of the medical costs her ongoing care would require for the rest of her life. Just over a year after the attack, in the summer of 2010, Sandra died of an aortic aneurysm, her health worn down, friends and family believed, by grief, by litigation, and by the horror of what had happened to the woman she had once called a close friend. She had, by then, already buried her only daughter and her husband. Travis's death and the destruction of Charla's life were simply the last in a long line of losses her heart could not absorb. Travis's cremated remains were buried alongside her. The attack reshaped, at least briefly, the national conversation around exotic pet ownership. Later in 2009, lawmakers introduced the Captive Primate Safety Act, aimed at banning the private sale of chimpanzees and other primates as pets. Despite the support of major animal welfare organizations, including the Humane Society of the United States and the Wildlife Conservation Society, the bill died in the Senate and would be reintroduced unsuccessfully in the years that followed. A separate piece of legislation, inspired directly by what Officer Chiafari went through, sought to guarantee mental health coverage for police officers required to kill an animal in the line of duty. Years later, Charla Nash would also attempt to sue the state of Connecticut itself, seeking $150 million and arguing that officials had long known Travis posed a danger and failed to act. That case, too, ultimately failed, the state successfully arguing that no law had prohibited the Heralds from keeping him at the time of the attack. What remains is the question of why. Several explanations have been offered, none of them conclusive on their own. Charla's unfamiliar new hairstyle may well have rendered her, for a few critical seconds, unrecognizable to an animal who relied heavily on visual and behavioral cues to identify the people in his life. An autopsy later found traces of Xanax in Travis's system, confirmed by Sandra to have come from the tea she had given him earlier that day in an attempt to settle his nerves. In rare cases, the medication is known to produce the opposite of its intended effect, triggering paradoxical reactions that include agitation, hallucinations, and sudden bursts of aggression. There is also the matter of the years that preceded the attack. An increasingly sedentary, overweight, and isolated animal, kept largely indoors and denied the kind of physical and social outlet that a chimpanzee in the wild would naturally have. Chronic stress, confinement, and a sudden disruption to a familiar face may all have compounded one another in those final agitated hours, building toward a single catastrophic release. Whether any single factor was responsible or whether it was some combination of all of them may never be fully known. What is certain is this: for nearly 14 years, Travis had behaved so much like a person that almost everyone around him, from his owners to his neighbors to the police who knew him by name, had come to think of him as something closer to a particularly hairy relative than a wild animal. He could drink from a glass and operate a television remote, but underneath the costume of domestication, he remains, at his core, exactly what he always had been: a wild chimpanzee, possessed of a strength and unpredictability that no amount of familiarity could ever fully tame. The tragedy of Travis was never that he behaved like an animal. It was that, for so long, everyone around him had managed to convince themselves he wasn't one. Today, Travis's story continues to surface in unexpected places.
The 911 call from that February afternoon was later used alongside police radio traffic from the shooting itself in a television documentary about animal attacks. Years afterward, a fictionalized echo of his story appeared on the big screen in a film about an animal actor that turns violently on the set where it had once performed safely for years. For Officer Chiafari, the story ends not with anger, but with something closer to sorrow. He still thinks from time to time about meeting Charla Nash someday, though he has never quite felt ready. He keeps something close to a sense of humor about it all, joking that his daughter still warns him before walking into rooms where chimps appear on television. But the deeper truth he carries with him is quieter and harder. Travis, he has said, was a victim of his circumstances every bit as much as anyone else that day. A wild thing asked to live a human life, until the day his nature reasserted itself with devastating and irreversible consequences for everyone involved. 14 years of wine glasses, baseball games, and gentle wrestling matches in the yard could not change what Travis fundamentally was, and in the end, neither could the people who loved him most. Sandra Harold gave him a home, a name, and a family. She could not give him the one thing that might have saved them both, the freedom to simply be a chimpanzee rather than a substitute for the child and husband she had already lost. It is a story with no villain in the traditional sense, only a long chain of good intentions, blurred boundaries, and a single, irreversible afternoon in which the line between pet and predator finally, fatally disappeared.